السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الذي لا إله سواه، والحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه، حمدا يليق بجماله وجلاله وجزيل وكريم عطائه ونعمائه. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف أنبيائه سيدنا ومولانا محمد الصادق الأمين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين، وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم اجعلنا منهم. Welcome everyone to our seventh session. The session today will feel a little bit different. We'll focus this time on how to empty our cup using some mindfulness techniques. The sources this time are from a program called mindful.ca, which I'll explain what that is, and also from the Calm app. But before we get on with it, we like to recap where we are in our journey together, the Tazkiya journey together. This is the figure that we do not want to ever forget. We are engaged, inshallah, in the perpetual Tazkiya cycle that we started it by studying some ilm, some useful ilm or ilm al-nafi'. That ilm al-nafi' tells us how we should be, how we should approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what kind of character should I have, what kind of happiness should I pursue in life. And when I focus the lens on my inside, my heart, then immediately I find in a good way what my shortcomings are. I know what can be improved. I know my deficiencies, which is very good, because the last thing I want is to be blind to my shortcomings, or to be deluded thinking that I am this and that while I'm not. So the ilm tells us what needs to be done, and then immediately as a byproduct of that, we feel remorse. How come I didn't do this earlier? How come I did not learn this earlier? How come I'm not closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though He is very, very close to me? Why am I turning my back to Allah? And that burst of emotions is tawbah, in the sense that I sincerely want to be better. And with tawbah, if I don't act on it, like this, like burst of energy, if I don't upkeep it, then it will simply fade away. So what I should fade away, meaning that I'll go back to the status quo. And I'm sure, every now and then you listen to a khutbah or listen to a lesson by chance, and you say, oh my God, I should do this. And then you just go away and it's gone, finished. So what we need to do is to stay in mujahada, meaning I fight against myself, I struggle against myself. And as a support structure to help me stay in mujahada, I need to detach myself from the usual attachments that we spend quite a bit of time and money on eating and playing and resting and sleeping, mingling and wasting time, and so on and so forth. So I have to tame my nafs and tame the tendencies. Like my nafs is like a wild horse. So I need to tame that wild horse. And I need to be on guard all the time to make sure that this wild horse is tamed. So I have to set conditions for my nafs, that a contract that you must do one, two, three. So this is called musharata, setting conditions. And then I need to monitor, like, am I doing what I promised myself to do, or not? So you need to monitor and figure out whether how the plan is unfolding. And then as I assess, there has to be muhasaba or accounting. Like anything in life, I want to know what I've done, what I haven't done, areas to improve. Like if you are, for instance, in a serious job, every year your boss does that with you. You have a contract, you have a job to do, your performance is being evaluated all the time, and you are held to account every now and then, once a year or so, in an annual review. And then the fourth step is mu'ataba and mu'aqaba, meaning that either reprimanding if I am not doing enough, and punishing, in a sense, myself. Without being like too gloomy here, this is very, very practical, that these are steps that I have to do if I am a serious student of ilm, if I am a serious seeker of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there has to be a program, and that program has to be monitored. Otherwise, again, it will fade away. And then we continue in this. This is a lifetime mission. This is not something that the course will end and it's over. When the course ends, this is the beginning of becoming, meaning that now I have a program, I know what to do, and this what I need to do. Am I doing it? Is there amal? Amal, we said that there is ilm and amal. Ilm, knowledge, amal is action. So am I in action? Am I in mindfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time? Am I in plentiful zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We went through, for instance, morning azkar and evening azkar and azkar after the salah, and the different types of azkar, including salah, of course, the most important form of dhikr, and so on. So if I score myself, where do I stand? Some of you, mashallah, are professors and you grade students all the time, and the rest of us are students, so we get graded all the time. So can you grade yourself? You don't need to publish this, you don't need to tell anybody about that. It's just like between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, when we said to be in plentiful zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we said that I prepare myself with a heartfelt wudu, preparing for salah, and then I perform my salah with focus, high quality salah, high quality fard salah, not something that I'm in and out and I'm still thinking about my emails and I still thinking about dunya or all kinds of dunya matters, but rather focused with like being on the shores of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during my salah. And then we want to pad our salah, meaning that before and after we pray the sunan, for many, many good reasons that you know, including that if there are shortcomings in my fard salah, then the sunan compensate for that, and they also keep me close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have to recite a daily word of Quran, even if it is like few pages before I go to bed. Like if I am consistent with that, maybe, I don't know, like 2/4 of a hizb, you finish your juz in 4 days, in a few weeks you finish a khatma and repeat and so on. So if you are consistent with a small amount of reciting the Quran every day as part of the diet, the spiritual diet, as part of the word, then I will be progressing. And then I have to be connected to the Prophet ﷺ. I'm connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger, the best of creation, the role model in my life that I aspire to kind of take steps to being like him. He is sent to us to perfect akhlaq and for us to follow in his footsteps, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then he himself, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, used to say istighfar, seek forgiveness from Allah 100 times a day. So what about us? Am I making istighfar 100 times, at least 100 times a day or not? Am I doing, for instance, my morning azkar? And if you remember from the morning azkar that we went through together, it's like really a beautiful 30 minutes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not the Jeff Bezos 1 hour of whatever, but this is half an hour that is dedicated with focus, heart focused, laser sharp on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, affirming our ubudiyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us with all kinds of things, including the diseases of the heart. During the morning and evening azkar, we enlist what are the possible diseases of the heart, and I seek refuge in Allah from the diseases of the heart, like for instance, seeking refuge in Allah from shak, doubt, from shirk, from association with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nifaq or hypocrisy, and kufr altogether, like getting out of faith, and shiqaq meaning that divisiveness, that meaning not only some people stray away from practicing Islam, but they even fight against Islam and become enemies of Islam from inside, and so on. So we seek refuge from all of this. We seek refuge in Allah from being deluded, from being loving power, loving fame, and so on. Later on, inshallah, we'll have a closer look at itemized diseases of the heart. But the morning and evening azkar remind us of that. And then azkar after salah, I don't just say salam and then run back into the middle of life. I sit down and say the azkar after the salah to also maintain the momentum, the heart momentum that hopefully I refined during salah, to maintain this after salah. And then as the day goes on, there is a dhikr for everything. To give you an example, a dhikr when you are entering the washroom, a dhikr when you look in the mirror and like your hairdo or like your dress or suit or whatever, you say, Allahumma hassin khuluqi kama hassanta khalqi. Oh Allah, as you perfected my exterior, please perfect my interior, meaning my heart and my akhlaq. So this is like an attempt to list 10 things that are very, very important to keep me in nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then rate yourself. Each one of these points, give yourself from 0 to 10. Give yourself a score. Am I, for instance, is my salah pretty good but not perfect? I give myself 8 out of 10. Or is it terrible? I give myself 2 out of 10. Or I'm not praying at all. And then in this case, I'd get 0 out of 10, and so on. And then you sum up the numbers and give yourself a score from 0 to 100. And then monitor that. Maybe at the beginning, I'm 20, I'm 30. After a while, and as I practice every now and then, I grab this sheet and regrade myself and see, for instance, I'm now 40, I'm 50, I'm 60. In Ramadan, I'm 70 and 80, and so on. And that would give us feedback. What kind of progress are we making? So this is where we are in the journey together. Today, change in flavor a little bit. We will talk about mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness, nowadays, is becoming very, very common in a Western, secularized, neutral, non-religious form. However, we are not interested in anything that is void of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we examine that in an Islamic context and see it in the envelope of Tazkiya to see what we can benefit how we can benefit from it in our Tazkiya journey. So not by itself, not for its sake, but how we benefit from it in the Tazkiya journey. So how do we'll discuss some tips for practicing mindfulness and examples of mindfulness practices or meditations and the difference between mindfulness in general and mindfulness meditation. And then we'll do an exercise together for 30 minutes, a breathing exercise that I hope you like it and find it very useful. And then recap at the end, how is that beneficial in the Tazkiya context? And then next week, we'll focus on something related but slightly different, which is what is known as gratitude mindfulness, how to be grateful, how to cultivate gratitude. Why is it sometimes we feel ungrateful, pissed off at life and angry and this and that? Why is it so? Are there causes that we can put our fingers on that cause that ingratitude? So we want to understand what is gratitude, what are the benefits of gratitude and being grateful, what are the barriers that prevent us from being grateful, what are the solutions to these barriers, and then at the end we'll summarize everything and conclude the pros and cons and what I call poison in the honey. And you will understand this more when we go on, because if you have ever encountered this field of mindfulness and you find like yoga studios here and there and people who claim to be quote unquote healers and whatnot, and then you find it interesting, then at least know what are the dangers of that. Like what could be beneficial that is attracting masses of people to do that, and what could be dangerous for us that should be avoided at all costs. And I call that poison in the honey. Like starting with this, just with a quick disclaimer, as we've done before, I'm not an expert. I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm just sharing my experience. I took a 1 year course once upon a time when I felt intense stress in my life. And I think many of us nowadays in the middle of life experience stress. If you have stress in exams or stress in your career or in your marriage or this and that. So there are all kinds of stressors. So I took a course on that to kind of figure out how it can help. And I did actually practice this kind of mindfulness meditation mainly with the goal of managing stress. And it was guided by a medical doctor, actually, not like, untrained professionals, but this is actually a medical doctor, and also with the Calm app. So this lecture today is just kind of my take on the above. So take it with a grain of salt. And then nowadays I switched entirely to Islamic mindfulness, which is the purpose of this course. The purpose of this course is to cultivate mindfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and being in dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything we say, everything we do, everything we think, every feeling we harbor. All of this is our goal. Nevertheless, the above, the I don't know what to call it, maybe modern mindfulness or what Western mindfulness has some tips that would be helpful to us. So mindfulness, that you just like notice that this is not the classical Tazkiya study that we're like, if you're taking a Tazkiya course, typical Tazkiya course, as we have been doing, usually you will not encounter this. Arguably, some scholars, rightfully so, think that this business of mindfulness out there, that people spend hours and hours and hours and days and weeks, and you go to a camp for mindfulness training and so on. Arguably, that could be the opposite of mindfulness of Allah because you're mindful of everything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's antithetical of what we want to do. Then why study it then if we are focused on Tazkiya? Because, as I mentioned, this is a trending topic for wholesale happiness that like if you ever, for instance, talk to people about I'm stressed, this and that, they will tell you do that. So at least know what it is. You must have heard of it. You must have yourself suffered from stress and sought help, maybe went to a doctor or personal coach for help, and they give you techniques to calm down mainly. So that's calming down in general is a useful thing to manage stress and anxiety, and to also put the brakes on unfolding panic attack, meaning that sometimes, we feel burdened by life. Like someone, I know a close person to me, like, what's wrong? Then the person would say, everything. So, so everything is wrong. So we get into these moments where you feel that nothing is moving, nothing is going right. So that is a state that sometimes we get stuck in, and feel that we're almost having a panic attack. And how do you get out of this? So those mindfulness techniques, as the example that we'll try today, helps us um, detach from the worries of dunya. And that would help us in the context of this course, help us make space for mindfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you will see as we talk about it that there are some parallels to what we're trying to say and some wisdoms. However, Islamic wisdom, you will appreciate that nothing matches that. And also, very importantly, because since we are children of the West, we live in the West. Our kid, like maybe some people like me, I mean, I'm an immigrant to this country, but my kids are not, and all what they know is the West. So we need to be aware of the poison in such practices if they are practiced away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very important. So bottom line is that we study this or examine this in the envelope of Tazkiyah. Nothing from now on that we do that is not in the envelope of Tazkiyah. And like any wisdom that we can gain from this or something to learn, as the saying goes, الحكمة ضالة المؤمن فهو حق إن وجدها فهو حق الناس بها, meaning that wisdom is the lost article of the believer. Take it where you find it, assuming, of course, conditioned, to underline this, conditioned on not contradicting our Islamic principles. So if there's something out there that can help us that does not contradict Islamic principles, then we may look into it. So overall, in general, we've just like reviewing some of the things that we discussed together. What are the key root causes of our ailments in life? And what are the categorical solutions? Categorical solutions means that high level, what do we do? So the root causes of our ailments, as we discussed, is that like we're very busy minds, we have worries, we have anxieties, we have a sense that nothing is working, a sense of ingratitude. We have busy, skewed hearts, opposite to sound heart, opposite to a true mirror, that the nafs, my nafs, is weighing me down, and the tentacles of the nafs are overpowering my heart. Then I start looking for the haram stuff and justifying it and following my shahawat and following my hawa and so on. And then mindfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like, why do we keep forgetting? Like you wake up in the morning and go through the day and go to bed at night, how much of that time you were aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So in a sense, وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ, there is no room for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our life, and this has to change. Like if we are busy with everything and we are in ghafla, like heedlessness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then obviously this must change. And we are the losers if we don't, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invites us for what gives us life. So what are the categorical solutions then to address those root causes? We need to empty and purify and detach the heart from dunya. I'm not saying, don't misunderstand, I'm not saying crawl in a cave and die. I'm saying like, no, you can engage with life in like a fulsome way, but in the envelope of being aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doing everything that we do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what we've been doing in this course, like what the Tazkiya, we acquire the ilm, the tawbah, the mujahada, the murabata, all of that is a categorical solution to the ailments that we have. The scholars say that there is takhliya and then tahliya. Takhliya means like remove the scum from our lives, remove some of like excesses of dunya and haram and all that. Remove it, and then after that comes tahliya, that you adorn our hearts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we want to slow down the mind, because the more you stuff in your mind, it will become saturated like a sponge. If you have a sponge that is saturated with water, if you throw more water at it, it's not going to absorb anything because it's already saturated. So how do we slow down and empty the worries? There are some techniques for that, which what we're talking about here. So we need to kind of pace ourselves. Pacing meaning control what is going in you, in your mind, in your heart, Make sure that the life that we live on steroids these days are jamming my brain and jamming my heart. So I need to make room, make space for what is most important, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In a sense, it is a funny one. In a sense, I want to reduce the congestion that I have in my life. Why am I bringing this? So it's funny that I specialize in my engineering work. I specialize in transportation and specifically the so-called congestion management. And I try to explain, for instance, when I meet with the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario or the City of Toronto staff, or talk to students or talk to the media and so on, I try to explain to them that if you try to stuff a system with something, it's going to break that. And it's just, to give you an example, I give a TEDx talk once, and I was trying to explain to the audience that rush hour traffic. If you're leaving Toronto, for instance, at 5 p.m., this so-called rush hour, no one is rushing anywhere. It's stop and go like traffic. So what I'm suggesting is we pace the pouring of cars into the system, so the system would not clog and come to a complete stop. And I give them a simple experiment that I'll share with you here, and then we'll bring it back to why am I saying this transportation stuff in a Tazkiya course. So take a listen.
How to make roads smarter so we don't have to go through that frustrating congestion that leads to this kind of rage. So the answer turns out to be fairly simple and actually paradoxical. The answer is, if you want to arrive home faster, slow down. Doesn't make any sense. So I'm telling you to go home faster, pace yourself, and slow down. Can this be true? Would this work? Well, let's see some magic. See it before your own eyes. What we have here is what I call the Doug McDonald setup, and these two funnels represent two freeways, identical ones. This is not so smart freeway. This is a smarter freeway. And what I have here is rice kernels representing cars. So what happens during rush hour every day? We simply rush. So this is us, and this is how we get on the freeway. As you see, this is the congestion that you go through. This is what gets you frustrated, delayed, and punching each other. So now what? What do we do to make things better? Well, the solution, as I mentioned, slow down, pace yourself. This is the smart highway now. So what I'm going to do, pour the rice slowly, slowly, slowly. Everybody's going through. No one is stuck in congestion. Nobody's screaming. Nobody's kicking. Nobody's punching. So it becomes faster to get home if you actually slow down. Now, I cheated a little bit here. I know how to pace this rice in the funnel so it would not get stuck like the first one. But in real life, on a real road, how would we come up with that pace? This is where artificial intelligence comes in.
So that's a little bit of, like, I digressed here to talk about the traffic example, but I personally believe that our life in general follows this model, meaning that if you keep pouring stuff in your head and in your heart, attachments to dunya, worries, seeking business, seeking money, seeking a new car, a new house, a new this, a new pair of pants, a new iPhone, then you will jam up. You think that, for instance, you'll be able to multitask, you're on your phone all the time, trying to do 5 different things at the same time, you will jam up. That's mentally. So, like, multitasking is a myth in the sense that if you try to do a lot at the same time, your performance degrades. Now it's the same thing in, I'm proposing that it's the same thing with my heart. If my heart is saturated with dunya, there is no place for anything else. It's already congested. So what should I do in order to reduce this jam? And this is where mindfulness comes into the picture. So the idea here is to kind of slow down, pace, and moderate my life. How does it feel? Like, it's hard to explain. Like, how do you explain honey, for instance? You will try. We try it. So we'll try it together and see precisely what it is. And if you Google, for instance, what is mindfulness meditation, it will tell you it's a practice that involves being aware or focused of your present time, being in the present, including your sensations, for instance, breathing in and breathing out, your feelings, your thoughts. And then here's the poison in the honey, they say, without judgment or interpretation. So we always, in Islamic perspective, we always monitor the nafs and judge it and make sure that I am improving the nafs. But nevertheless, this is the definition. So it is said, for instance, that we spend 90% of the time either ruminating about the past. You're pissed off about someone who said something to you, or you lost something, or you got into a car accident or whatnot. So you keep thinking about the past that you cannot change anyway, or worried about the future stuff that didn't happen yet. And then the current moment, the present moment, you're not even in it. Like you travel, for instance, from A to B, and you arrive, and you haven't even noticed which route did you take or what did you see on the route to your destination, and it's just like you're totally in la la land, like absent-minded. Now take that to praying. You enter the prayer, and again, you're in La La Land, and you didn't catch anything of your prayer. You finish and go on, and you were not even there to start with. So if I train myself to be mindful in general, and then later we'll talk specifically about how to be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and cultivate that, then I can reduce the clutter in my mind, in my heart, reduce stress and reduce anxiety, and get out of the so-called fight or flight mode. If you know what that is, like fight or flight mode means that, if, for instance, a tiger chases you, you will run faster than the best sprinter, the world champion in sprinting. Why is it so? Because your body like produces hormones, adrenaline and whatnot to give you like superpower for a short period of time. If you manage to outrun the tiger and escape, then you immediately will collapse. You'll feel tired and sweaty and shivering and crying and so on, because this like intense moment drained you. Now, this is when we are in danger, but if I'm not in immediate danger every day, however, I have stressors, that drip stress puts me in fight or flight mode all the time. And we cannot sustain that. You cannot sustain this in your life. You start feeling tired, you'll start feeling pain in your neck, pain in your back, pain in your heart, headaches, you name it. So it's not only psychological, but it can also be somatic in the sense that it would show in your body in terms of in the form of pain and aches and so on. So the mindfulness slows down that monkey mind of ours that keeps jumping and bouncing off the walls and focusing on something specific and simple. No movement, because jerkiness and movement like takes your mind to different places. So you just sit still, and focus on what you want to focus on. And I hope you get the idea now that I want to get off the thought train that I'm thinking about a million different things. I just want to stop that train. So, what are the tips that experts of this stuff say to kind of be effective in your mindfulness? First of all, find a quiet space, like set aside a space to practice this, and sit still. Like don't move, don't do this, for instance, while cooking or driving a car or whatnot. You need to be still in a spot, and then you focus. For example, there are different kinds, but for example, you focus on your breath. You close your eyes and breathe in and breathe out naturally, and focus on the sensations of this breath going in you and out of your body. These also say that, thoughts will arise. So notice your thoughts. Don't try to suppress them, or don't try to get angry at yourself that you cannot focus. Like treat your thoughts as they come and go, as clouds passing over your head, or birds, for instance. They say that you cannot prevent birds from flying over your head, but you can prevent them from nesting in your head. So we want to keep the birds flying away, not nesting in my head. I want to keep the thoughts moving away from me and not nesting in my head. Another example, for instance, imagine you're in a nice park looking at white water rapids, a river that is gushing and white water, and you hear the sound of the water crashing on the rocks and whatnot. If you sit on a chair and watch this water moving and gushing, that's a very relaxing, actually, because it's a beautiful scene, and the sound of the water and the breeze and so on, that's relaxing. But if I take you off your chair and put you in the water, then you will have a panic attack because now you are inside the rapids. So the idea here that when we try to cultivate mindfulness is to get out of these rapids and watch them from a distance. So step away, out and away of your monkey mind thoughts and watch them from the side as an observer and be patient because no matter how hard you try, your mind will take you places. Meaning that I'm trying to focus on my breath, for instance, I will immediately start thinking about my exam or like this is how long this is taking, this is like boring, when it's going to end and stuff like that. You start thinking about this. Same thing happens in Salah. Like for example, you're praying and your mind goes to places. Or you're praying Taraweeh in the mosque and the sheikh keeps going and going and going and he's wondering when he's going to stop. So your mind goes places. So what you need to do is just like peacefully bring it back. Bring back the mind to the task that you are focused on. And when you practice this repeatedly, you learn that. You learn how to be mindful. Like how do you focus in Salah, for instance? Like you keep practicing and working with this information in mind on keeping your thoughts on the task and not on a million different other things. So, examples of this kind of mindfulness meditation, like what, for instance, there's something called breathing meditation, what we will try today. It's called diaphragmatic breathing, meaning that you inflate your belly and deflate your belly, like your diaphragm in your chest going up and down, and the belly is inflating and deflating, and you're focused simply on that, and you will see how that helps. So you feel, for instance, the air of the breath going in your nostrils and out of your nostrils. You feel, for instance, that it goes in cold and comes out warm. You feel, for instance, above the tip, a bit underneath your nose and above the tip of your lip, you feel a draft of air going up and down. When you do that, you'll also feel, that's the surprising part, and you will see that today, that you feel that this breath that you're taking is not just going to your lungs. It's going to everywhere in your body, to your fingertips, to your toes, to your head. Like the breath is coming in and out from your head like a dolphin, which is obviously, as my wife says, that's not anatomically possible, but you will see why, medically speaking, why that breath actually activates every cell in your body as if it's actually going to your fingertips and your toes and your neck and your head and so on. I'm not crazy, by the way, you will see it for yourself. Another type of um, uh, mindfulness meditation is called body scan, where again, sitting, you scan your body from head to toe and move piece by piece. Like I'm focused now on my skull, on my eyes, on my nose, on my chin, on my chest, on my stomach, on my legs, on my feet, and so on. When you scan that slowly again, what is the goal here? The goal is that I am putting my focus on an object, a simple object, not 500 different things at the same time. And to the point that when you do that, you will feel, for instance, tingles in your fingertips that typically or like normally you don't feel that. You start seeing fine sensations when you do this. There is another type of meditation called, for instance, allowing and let be. That, for instance, if you have pain, let's say, for instance, I have a toothache or a headache, we want that pain to go away. So part of the pain is wanting the pain to go away. So they say, for instance, that allow and let be. Just sit and like as Dr. Stefan Trevo says, have a cup of tea with your pain. Just sit down and, okay, I have pain. I feel it. Oh, my body, I hear you. I feel it. That in itself dials down the pain because um, um, the majority of the pain is actually anxiety about the pain. Sometimes even people who suffer from severe anxieties, for instance, they are anxious about anxiety. Like a situation is happening, so I feel that I'm going to have anxiety, so I'm anxious because I'm going to have anxiety. And you can see where this is going. That can be a very compound, rapidly accelerating effect. So another type is walking meditation, for instance. Walking meditation, you go out for a walk in nature, contemplate nature and Allah's creation in nature. And as you're moving step by step, you're feeling where you're putting your foot on the ground and it touching your ground and feel your heels and soles touching the ground and so on. There's another type which I'm not a fan of, just listing it here out of completeness. It's called loving kindness meditation, where you focus on directing compassion towards yourself. Like, for instance, if you feel that you're not worthless, you start saying yourself, you're worthy person. I am a strong person. I'm a lovely person, and so on. I don't look like that because it's actually antithetical to what we're trying to do in Tazkiya, that I just don't want to pamper myself. I want to tame myself. So it's critical actually that I know the deficiencies of myself and how myself is dragging me down and work on that. Nevertheless, some people do that. And there are other types of meditations out there. So what is the difference then between mindfulness in general and mindfulness meditation? Mindfulness in general is an ability that a quality, if you will, that can be embodied throughout my life. If I train myself, for instance, to be mindful, I'll be mindful of Allah. I'll be mindful in my prayer. I'll be mindful when I walk in nature. I see the flowers and the sunset and so on, and I appreciate more the creation of Allah and so on. So I'm not just like absent-minded. So it's very useful to be mindful in general. Then mindfulness meditation is actually a practice to cultivate that, meaning that when we, for instance, as we will try today, focus on our breath for some time, that will enable us to cultivate this overall ability of being mindful. And then this will come to us, will become useful to us when we cultivate mindfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they say that when I'm calm, the secret to clear is calm, meaning that if I manage to be calm and calm myself down, then there will be clarity in everything that I interact with. So this meditation is calming, but I have to be careful here that it doesn't change our akhlaq, it doesn't change our character. It simply empties the mind and make us calmer, but doesn't empty the heart and fill the heart with good akhlaq. While, for instance, if I am mindful about gratitude in particular, then being mindful of that can change some aspects of my akhlaq, in the sense of being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like we say that, for instance, in Tazkiya, that I want to feel gratitude. Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is providing me, I need to be grateful for. I approach Allah with love and gratitude and awe and so on. While in secularized meditation, they actually train the person to be grateful for the gift. Like if you're healthy, you should be grateful for your health. If you are, let's say, for instance, have money, you should be grateful for the money, regardless of who gave you this. They say that actually. So they say if you're not religious, for instance, not big deal, just be great. Like if you wake up in the morning and find $100 in front of your door, you will be happy, regardless of who left it there. This is antithetical to Islam because our gratitude is to and only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as we draw some useful stuff from these practices, we have to put it in the envelope of Islam, in the envelope of Tazkiya, that I cultivate gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I empty my heart and I don't leave it empty. I fill it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so on. So it's very important that that we take this in the envelope of the Tazkiya, because our goal here is simply to unjam, like exactly like the traffic video or the rice video that I shown you, shown today. I want to unjam my mind, unjam my heart in the envelope of the scale, not merely in a secular or secularized manner, and not aiming necessarily for the sensual pleasure of relaxing, because like the sensual pleasure of relaxing is still sensual. It's like it's not spiritual. It's although it's good to relax, there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't want to. I don't do this mainly for the joy of relaxing, like the joy of eating, the joy of this. Like it's not about pleasure. It's about emptying up myself in order to be able to focus on Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. For me, for instance, this breathing practice is actually a journey in the wondrous creation inside of us. Like you'll feel, something simple, like you'll see how deep this is. So the wondrous creation inside of us and the wondrous creator, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like if a simple breathing exercise, a breath, breathing in and breathing out, how many times do you do that a day? You do that 15 times a minute. So how many times you breathe in and out a day, and then we never think about that. We never say Subhanallah, as I'm sure you will say it at the end, that you say Subhanallah. Just simply breathing can have that much depth. I remember, for instance, when COVID came and we started wearing masks and a little virus threatened our life, and we couldn't even breathe. Those who got COVID couldn't even breathe, and how scary that was. And then COVID came and went, and nobody contemplated this. Nobody took in that, oh my God, simple breathing is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let alone everything else. So, like, isn't it due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say subhanallah, say alhamdulillah for breathing, let alone everything else that is in our lives from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, as the poet says, تأمل سطور الكائنات فإنها من الملك الأعلى إليك رسائل، وقد خط فيها لو تأملت خطها ألا كل شيء ما خلا الله باطل، تشير بإثبات الصفات لربها فصامتها يهدي وما هو قائل. Meaning that, contemplate the lines in creation. Like when we look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم. I will show them, i.e. human beings, I'll show them our miracles, our signs, في الآفاق, on the horizons. Look at creation around you. Look at the cosmos, for instance. And then, well, you don't have to go that far. Just look at yourself. Look within yourself. So if you contemplate the creation of the Sovereign Most High, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and carefully read those messages, like what you see in creation, including our own creation, is messages from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do these messages say? They say everything but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is nothing. If you compare 0 to infinity, it's nothing. So the point, like all these wondrous creations, what did they say? They point to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala majesty. تشير بإثبات الصفات لربها. Even some of these messages are silent messages. Some of these messages you can hear, but both the ones that are silent and ones that you hear point us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the mindset and the heart set that I want you to take into the exercise that we will do together. We will be spending almost 30 minutes. What you need to do, this is by Dr. Stefan Trevo. He's a psychiatrist, a psychotherapist, and very well versed in this stuff, in the sense that when you go to a psychiatrist today, they give you pills. If you have anxiety, they give you anxietics. If you have depression, they give you antidepressants. But this doctor believes that we can heal ourselves without such drastic medications. This is a school of thinking, but you will see. So what I need you to do now is sit comfortably in a quiet place without being disturbed. And if you cannot maintain being sitting up for that long, then you can lie down, but don't fall asleep. Okay. So I'll stop my camera, and then after we're done, I'll turn it on again, and then we'll wrap up. Sorry, it's acting up on me.
I'm Stefan Trevo, and this is a dynamic mindfulness guided meditation. The focus is on the breath. First, take some time to position yourself properly, following the principles of dynamic alignment, the right seat height, stacking the spine, releasing tensions in the out-breath and realigning in the in-breath, relinquishing control of your limbs, and remembering that you're sitting in alignment not like a telephone pole, but like a hollow bamboo in the wind. Please notice that your attention is in the somatic and physical sensations of the body. Not in thoughts, not in feelings, but right in the body. And so far, it is following the energy flow connected to the alignment. As we continue with the alignment in the background, it doesn't cease to happen, it continues to go on in the background. We are now going to move our focus to the breath. And in order to really penetrate the breath deeply, we are going to go through 5 steps. The first step is the breath acknowledgement. The simple acknowledgement that the breath is going on. So the instruction is breathing in, I'm aware of the in-breath, and breathing out, I'm aware of the out-breath. Notice that I talk here of the breath as a noun, as a thing. Noticing the in-breath and noticing the out-breath. We are now going to intensify our attention to the breath, which is called the breath immersion. And here the instruction sounds like this. Breathing in, I'm aware of the in-breath from the very beginning to the very end. And breathing out, I'm aware of the out-breath from the very beginning to the very end. You notice here that there's a shift that occurs. The attention is now much more intense from moment to moment, following the process of breathing. From the beginning of the in-breath, moment by moment, all the way to the end of the in-breath, and then from the beginning of the out-breath, moment by moment, all the way to the end of the out-breath. So the breath here becomes a verb. We realize that there's really no such thing as the breath, but that in fact what's going on is breathing. We are switching from noun to verb, from noticing this thing called the breath to realizing that it is a process of breathing, following it moment by moment. In this following of the breathing, notice that at the end of the out-breath there is a longer pause. Include that longer pause in the moments that you keenly pay attention to the energy flow of whatever is happening at that moment. So you follow the in-breath from the very beginning to the very end, and you follow the out-breath to the very beginning to the very end, which includes a longer pause at the end of it. And now we're going to take it the next step, which is the breath differentiation. That means that when we look this closely to the breath, we realize that the in-breath has a very different quality than the out-breath. Physiologically, the reason for that is that the in-breath is accompanied by a sympathetic nervous system arousal. It is like receiving a little adrenaline shot. And the out-breath is a parasympathetic nervous system arousal. Technically speaking, I would have to say an acetylcholine shot, but to make it more accessible to you, it's as if you got a little Valium shot. So here you are. The in-breath is a receiving, expanding, and activating, and the out-breath is a releasing, calming, and grounding. What I want you to do now is not just have this information available on an intellectual basis, but to actually feel, directly feel in your physical and somatic sensations, directly feel the difference between the way the process of breathing in feels like a receiving, expanding, and activating, and the process of breathing out like a releasing, calming, and grounding. Take some time to clearly differentiate the two as you continue to follow the breath and the breathing process moment by moment. Feel that difference between the in-breath and the out-breath, between breathing in and breathing out. And now we are going to move to the next point, which is called the breath generalization. The sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system are part of the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is distributed throughout the body, everywhere in the body. In other words, because the breath is accompanied by the activations of the different branches of the autonomic nervous system, the breathing process does not only occur in the chest or in the belly where the muscles are engaged, but it occurs in the whole body. So now in the breath generalization, we're going to expand our attention to include the whole body, but still focusing on the connection with the breathing. And as you continue with your alignment, or you put your attention, for example, in the sensations of your left foot, or you put your attention directly on the belly or the chest, wherever you put your attention in the body, notice the difference of how these sensations appear in your awareness during the breathing in, and how they appear in your awareness during the breathing out. We have already encountered this principle when we practiced the body scan, but now we are really focusing on the connection with the breathing, realizing that the whole body breathes, not just the chest, not just the belly, but everything breathes. And in fact, it is impossible to observe anything in our subjective experience without it being moved like the ocean water moves the seaweed in the surf. Imagine, for example, being on a boat on the ocean. There's nothing you can do to escape the waves. You simply move up and down and up and down, and wherever you look, whatever you pay attention to is enveloped by this movement, by this wave of going up and down. And this is the same with the breathing. Whether you pay attention to the physical sensations, the somatic sensations, or feelings later on, or thoughts, everything moves and appears in your awareness differently during the process of the in-breath as it does during the process of the out-breath. So take some time now to explore in the body, feeling the body, the fact that your whole body breathes. And now, when you're ready, we are going to shift to the last step that we will explore in this program, which is called the breath non-interference. Notice how breathing out happens all by itself. All you need to do is let go at the beginning of the out-breath, and then the force of gravity takes care of your out-breath without you having to do anything. You can simply release and let it happen. When you reach the end of the out-breath and you begin the longer pause, just surrender to that pause. There's nothing you need to do. There's nowhere you need to go. There's nothing you need to solve. Just surrender to the pause at the end of the out-breath without having to do anything. And before you know it, seemingly out of nowhere, a new impulse arises, again, without you having to do anything whatsoever. And the in-breath will simply flow in without you having to breathe in. And so it goes. You will never have to take a breath again. The breathing always happens without your doing, whether you like it or not. And you can deeply relax and let go and let it breathe for you. This principle of non-interference is important for mindfulness as a whole. And the breath is a perfect opportunity to practice that ability to simply let it happen. Make no mistake, it is not easy to do so. It takes a very long time. And if you pay really close attention, you will find deeper and deeper ways that you interfere with the breathing. And of course, if you interfere with the breathing, you also interfere with all kinds of other energy flows that should be able to flow freely. So take a bit of time now to really concentrate on this non-interference of the breath, just letting it all happen, and hold it all in awareness from moment to moment. Now, briefly reviewing our 5 steps, which are really a gradual process that allows us to penetrate the breath deeper and deeper, beginning with the breath acknowledgement, the acknowledgement that there is a breath going on in us. Breathing in, I'm aware of the in-breath, and breathing out, I'm aware of the out-breath. Realizing that this is the breath as a noun, as a thing, and that in the next step we're going to get much closer to the breath as we discover the breath as a process in the breath immersion. Breathing in, I'm aware of the in-breath from the very beginning to the very end. Breathing out, I'm aware of the out-breath from the very beginning to the end. We discover that the breath is in fact not a noun, but it is a verb. It's not a thing, but it is a process that is unfolding moment by moment and that we can follow very precisely with our attention. And as we are so deeply immersed now in the moment by moment process and unfolding of the breathing, we discover that there's a very different sense to the in-breath as there is to the out-breath. The in-breath being receiving, expanding and activating, and the out-breath being a releasing, calming and grounding. And it's really important to differentiate those two, to feel the difference. It is like a massage of our whole body, like the waves of an ocean flowing through us. And as we experience those different qualities of the breathing in and the breathing out, we remember that this activating quality is because of an aspect of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic arousal, and the out-breath is because of another aspect of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic arousal, and that this autonomic nervous system is in our whole body, meaning that the breathing occurs in the whole body, which now allows us in the breath generalization to notice wherever our attention is in the body, whether it is in the chest, in the belly, or an arm, or a foot, or even in thoughts, that we realize that those energy flows that we directly experience appear differently during the in-breath than they do during the out-breath. And as we experience the whole body breathing like that, we just add the last step of the breath, non-interference, realizing that in fact we do not have to breathe. It breathes all by itself. Starting at the beginning of an out-breath, noticing that I can just let go of the out-breath. There's nothing you need to do. It falls, it flows out with the force of gravity. Resting in the pause at the end of the out-breath, again, there's nothing you need to do. All you do is surrender to that pause and to the vast emptiness that that pause opens up for you. And then finally, realizing that before you know it, out of seemingly nowhere, a new impulse arises in the form of the in-breath that again you do not have to do. It just arises for you and breathes in for you. And in this way, you can now take a few minutes on your own to review your alignment, the dynamic alignment that you sit with, reviewing the way that you work with your tool of attention and your attitude of coal, and deeply immerse yourself in the 5 steps of the breath acknowledgement, the breath immersion, the breath differentiation, the breath generalization, and the breath non-interference. Continue for a while, as long as you need to or makes sense to you.
I think we'll stop here and wrap up the takeaways. SubhanAllah, as you see, just simply breathing, something that we do 15 times a minute and never think about it, how elaborate this creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and what it does in us. And if we are mindful of something simple like this, we manage to kind of like empty our cup, empty our minds of stressors, the things that we chase and think about and trouble us, empty our hearts of all the attachments that pull us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine taking this calm state of mind and calm state of heart into your prayer. Will you be better focused? Imagine if you take this and combine it with the morning and evening azkar, in the sense that in the morning, I just sit for half an hour listening to the morning azkar, focusing on the meanings and the heartfelt meanings, connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while calmly breathing in and out in this meditative state, seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His wondrous creation on the horizon and in us. So I remember last time one of the ashab and on this call mentioned that he listens to adhkar while jogging, for instance, in the morning. My personal preference is to do as we did today, just like sit calmly for half an hour, nothing else but listening to the adhkar and taking it in as if it seeps into every part of me and every corner of my heart. So to finish up, I want you to reflect, ask yourself, do I have room for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Am I jammed up by dunya traffic like a clogged freeway? Am I making room, taking time to make room to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Am I contemplating Him subhanahu wa ta'ala in creation, everything that I see and everything that I see in me and feel in me? Am I in abundant dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And what do I need to do to better connect? So I'll leave you with that, and subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka وأتوب إليك.